This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. One of the most common things you hear from people, especially nationally, about the whole Deshaun Watson situation is what I like to call "what about the contract" commentary, where people, it sometimes it feels like find every avenue in which that contract can screw the Browns because it kind of feels like they want that contract to kind of stab the Browns in the back. So I decided what best not to bring in somebody who really knows the salary cap, studies the salary cap, especially for the Cleveland Browns, knows how Andrew Berry likes to operate. So me and Jack, we're going to react to a video from the Grossy Perna show talking about Deshaun Watson's contract. Just before we kind of get into this, in general, when you hear things about Watson's contract, what are the things that you hear that are most common and most commonly wrong about his contract?
Yeah, so lots of people they put too much weight on the actual salary cap hit numbers, and that is
Mm.
just universal across the way they look at how the Browns operate, and as well the rest of the league. Lots of hype's made around that, and it's better just to take it on the face value of what is it. 46 million every single year is what they give to Deshaun Watson, and how can they cope with that? Well, they spend 50 million more a year than the average team in the NFL. So it's effectively like his contract's actually free for the Cleveland Browns, which seems nuts to say. It's like an average spending roster plus a free quarterback is where they are. And if you compared what Deshaun Watson's contract is for if you had the Bengals cash spend or one of the poorer teams,
Mm-hmm.
then it can be really restrictive, etc. But Jimmy Haslam is bankrolling this team to a crazy level where they're spending so much more than everyone else. It's just not an issue. And yeah, it just does make me laugh. People look at a couple of numbers and go, oh, this is what's happening, with no concept of the Browns are operating differently. Even to the Eagles and the Saints, which lots of people put them in the same bucket, they are
Mm-hmm.
tier two. The Browns are tier one, operating on a very, very different level to the entire league.
And I think that's another thing that kind of like we don't understand is that not every owner is at the same level of access to their cash, right? When we talk about the Bengals, they're a cash poor team. The reason they're cash poor, same reason Mark Davis was cash poor for the Raiders, is because a lot of their wealth, a lot of the reason they're billionaires is because the Bengals are worth billions of dollars, right? They cannot sell the Bengals in order to make business deals for the Bengals. So that means that their cash pool is going to be a lot more limited. Somebody like Jimmy Haslam, who he's an oil man, right? At the end of the day, he sold gasoline and made truck stops, right? So maybe he has more money. Same thing happens with Baltimore, right? Where some guys just might not want to spend the cash, right? They want to run this a little bit differently, and that's why Baltimore kind of runs and does the traditional cap stuff there. So it's the NFL. The more you look into the cap, the more you realize how little we actually know about how this thing works, because a lot of people, I think, they make the mistake of doing like a couple of Google searches, pointing to a team and going, that team's going to be in trouble, and not realizing everything that can happen or the things that have already happened to kind of mitigate that. But let's react to this video. And Jack, if you see anything that you want to point out, please feel free to pause it.
The Browns are like screwed, dude. Like they are like if this year is not good, they are so screwed because of Deshaun Watson. Like
Yeah,
this is
that's what I don't get about them freeing up the space for this year. Because you push that money down the road, right?
All these this is all they have, dude. It's all they look. I'm gonna pull this up real quick. It's legitimately they have to do it this year because otherwise it's not happening. So this, let me zoom in here. Let's do a little zoomy zoom.
Yeah, 34 million in cap space right now, which puts him
Right.
at number 1.
Mistake one that I'd always encourage people to do: go to over the cap and don't use Spotrac. And I don't think it's any more clear than we look at the Browns' salary cap position in 2024. Spotrac's over 50 million off on what the actual number is. So not like a minor difference, 50 million. So people are running around going, oh, they're minus 83 million next year. What's going to happen? It's like, well, you jump to over the cap and it's like less than 30 million. And it's one that it's just, there is several different things the Browns are doing. Spotrac haven't included them on all their numbers. And as well, Browns aren't unique in how they're doing the contract. If we look at Jalen Hurts, every single year, it's the minimum number. And where he's highlighting the 46 million, that's cash. That's the same with every single one of these contracts. If they can change that down to 1 and restructure it and backload it again, but they're looking at the wrong thing. They're looking at cash spend. Browns have got loads of cash. It's not a problem, but we'll keep rolling. But do keep using over the cap to do your deals. You'll be smart for it.
Like we talked about a lot of teams that have a lot of pressure. I don't know if there's a team out there, like the Cowboys have a lot of pressure. It could be like really, really good. If the Browns are not a playoff team this year, and even if they are, then holy God, like it is going to be scorched earth. Can you imagine if Deshaun Watson goes out there and he just looks like a mediocre quarterback? Like it is going to destroy their franchise. Because, dude, they gave it to...
Again, it's... So, we spoke just before the video and we said they've got 50 mil extra they're spending per year. So, Jimmy is going to be pissed if this doesn't work out because, hey, Deshaun Watson's getting given 46 million a year. But the idea that this whole thing's going to fall apart, it will fall apart because they don't have a good quarterback. Nothing to do with this contract. If you had Deshaun Watson on 25 million a year and Deshaun Watson struggles and he is your quarterback 1, your team's going to suck. It's just kind of how it is. But if DTR comes in and DTR produces average quarterback play, let's just say the hypothetical that Deshaun Watson completely sucks, or even he's just injured for the whole year. If DTR comes in and plays as the 16th best quarterback, this team can compete because there is so much money pumped into it that there is nothing slowing it down.
And another thing I want to touch on with this is it's the quarterback position. Like if there's a position you take a swing on, this is the position. It's expensive. He's a former 3-time Pro Bowler at the position. So there's some security that he's eventually going to be really good. And they're talking about it as if like the Browns are trading for Trey Lance, right? Like the assumption doesn't really match where they're at if you look at like what DESHAUN has done in the past and his age, right? Because Russ was 32 when the Denver Broncos made that trade, or 31. DESHAUN was 26, almost 27 when they made that trade. So it just doesn't line up to have this assumption that, oh my gosh, it could very much end terribly. Anybody can, but also to your point, would the Browns be in a better situation are the Browns in a better situation right now, or if they would have been out here toiling around with Baker Mayfield? Right? Like
exactly.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
It's like, I understand people see the numbers and it can look gaudy and everything else like that, but it's like, hey, I'd rather be the Browns than Minnesota or Miami or what's another team with San Francisco has another dead end kind of situation at quarterback. Like those teams already know that they're going to have to overcome their quarterback. The Browns are in a position where, hey, they don't feel like the quarterback's going to be something they have to overcome. Now, if that becomes the case, obviously it's not going to be ideal, but that's been the case for this team for years, and it really hasn't destroyed anything in the way that they say. And it would destroy the team more if we just wasted Nick Chubb and Myles Garrett's entire prime, not even trying to get better at quarterback.
Yeah, and if he's top 8, this team's ready to compete. It's not one where we need a top 3 quarterback. He doesn't even need to get to, say, Burrow, Mahomes and Allen. I think it's fair to call them the top three. Mahomes obviously clearly number one. He doesn't need to be in that conversation. Top 8 is great. That is enough with how much talent and money there is around him that they can compete. And hey, if you get into the AFC Championship game and you're playing Patrick Mahomes, you're going to need a little bit of luck. That's just the way the NFL is. If everyone's on their A game, Patrick Mahomes wins. That's just how the NFL is going to be for the next few years. But I would happily play in the AFC game and go, if we get a bit of luck, we win this. If not, we don't. That's not a bad place for an NFL team to be when there's 32 of them and many are going just down dead ends.
Yeah, when Pat Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and Josh Allen are the top 3 quarterbacks, or arguably the top 3 quarterbacks, and they're all in your conference, and maybe you could sub them out with a good Lamar Jackson year or something like that, right? Like, everybody who's in that conversation is in the AFC outside of Jalen Hurts, and I don't think Jalen Hurts is really in the top 5 conversation, or at least commonly put in that top 5 conversation. So you're gonna have to take a chance at getting an elite quarterback play to compete in this conference. And to act like it's silly to pay for that, I think it's kind of ridiculous. And also, like, hey, the Browns were in a situation where they were bidding against the team that played in the area in which Deshaun was a legend in college in Carolina, and the Atlanta Falcons, which Deshaun Watson grew up rooting for. They probably needed to bring something extra to the table to convince him to come to Cleveland, a place he has no connections with, and has never really been at. And that's how they got him here. And again, you'd rather have him here under the money that he has than what else would you be doing right now? Would we be talking about Jacoby Brissett with this roster? Like, that would be very frustrating.
Here's a good question for you. When was the last above average quarterback in the NFL cut? Not traded, cut.
Cut an above average quarter? Was it Drew Brees?
It was Peyton Manning with his neck injury.
Oh, yeah, with the Andrew Luck. Yeah.
And what happened when he was cut? He actually got a bigger deal than the deal he was on when he got cut. So it's one that all QB deals are effectively guaranteed. And that's one thing that people just don't really seem to understand. It was like, these guys have guaranteed deals because if Jared Goff can go from team to team and keep getting paid,
and keep that contract,
anyone who's top 16 has zero concerns.
Yeah, and that's also another thing, because like people will bring up, well, Deshaun's is all guaranteed, even though like guys are signing for way more total money than him at this point, even for like the same amount of years that he got. And people are like, well, Deshaun's is guaranteed. You can't get off of it. The ideal is that if he's good at quarterback, you don't want to get off of it, right? And, if the money's guaranteed, maybe like that makes it harder for him to do what he did in Houston, where he's like, hey, I just don't want to play anymore here, right? Because the guarantees are just too enticing for him to ever want to sit out. So, I mean, like, there's a lot that goes into it that's like under discussed with this whole Watson contract. Let's continue to hear him out. Oops.
Fully guaranteed. You can't get out of it.
Right on
You
cue.
could cut him tomorrow and you are still paying a cajillion dollars. They are screwed. Like, this is dumb. They didn't just put all their eggs in one basket. They put the whole damn fridge in there and we're like, hopefully this works out.
It's a 3-time Pro Bowler, and we're talking about the quarterback position. What is he talking about?
I don't get what people think is plan A. Is it like, hey, we don't need a quarterback. Let's go the Bill Belichick route. We're going to have one quarterback on the roster. We're not going to sign anyone. Let's just run the football, bring back the 1920s, live the dream. It's like, what do they want teams to do? Just not have a quarterback?
And it's like the goalposts move on the trade conversation, because remember originally when the Browns did this move, they're just going to give up on Baker Mayfield. They could have just figured this thing out with Baker and they would have been fine. They wouldn't have they didn't even have to do this, right? That was the talking point. Then Baker went out there and dropped a deuce of a season that a lot of people who watched the film could have told you was coming because his issues weren't really labrum related in 2021 as much as they were the same things that have driven you crazy about Baker Mayfield for years, right? But that happens. The Browns move off of him. Deshaun, as bad as Deshaun played, better than Baker Mayfield was, nobody turns back around and go, oh, yeah, the Browns are actually kind of right for moving off of Baker Mayfield when they did, because, man, boy, oh, boy, yeah, you can talk about the contract, but they would be screwed right now if they would have paid Baker Mayfield $20 million or something like that. Like, again, would you rather be the Browns paying Deshaun Watson $45 million a year, or would you rather be the Giants paying Daniel Jones $40 million a year?
No,
I know who I'd be.
The front office deserve a lot of praise for sticking their neck out and going, Baker in it, because that is a tough thing to do, and that can lose you your job. When you make that move and you say, hey, we don't know what we're going to move on from Baker Mayfield to, and it was an unknown where if they lose that sweepstake for Deshaun Watson, they are in sort of an abyss and trying to work it out. Lots of GMs, as they've done with the Giants, they just go, hey, better devil it's like we can get above average quarterback play, we keep our jobs, and we might not win a Super Bowl, but we're in a job. And hey, my mentality for running a football team would be very different if I was a GM and I had to think about job security, not what is the most smart and sharp move. But they really stuck their neck out and said Baker ain't it, and they were chastised at the time. And pretty smart move.
Yeah,
it's bad.
I mean, luckily for the Browns, they got Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So
no, Brandon,
maybe
no.
What if
Brandon,
they get
He is so
Deshaun
bothered
Watson
by this contract.
excommunicated from America?
Brandon?
What ramifications does excommunication have on NFL salary cap? Yeah. No, so you're right. Like, I feel like they're freeing up money now, not necessarily like with an intent to make some big move like this week or next week, but as the season progresses, to be like, oh, this guy's available, let's go get him. Like before the trade deadline.
No, they can't. By the way, Perna's exotic meat is what that should be called.
Ooh.
Just the less crazy guy on the left, the guy on the right is making. The guy on the right is making a solid point there that this money is freed up for the future to keep doing that, and fair play to him. The guy on the left is just losing himself. And if DTR just absolutely balls out, and say Deshaun Watson missed his last 3 games this season, DTR comes in and lights it up, they could easily play that. And even if no team in the league wanted to take Deshaun Watson's contract, that's not a concern for the Browns. They could happily just leave him there at $46 million a year as the backup. It wouldn't happen, but just to play complete devil's advocate, they could leave him there as the backup, and cap-wise, they would be completely fine.
Because cap-wise, they're fine with DTR on the roster right now, right? It doesn't change because he starts, right? So that's another one where I don't know. Maybe people are invested in wanting this contract to be some kind of disaster because so much energy went into telling the public how terrible the contract was, right? And that's partly from NFL owners because not everybody's in the same spot to where they could put $230 million in escrow, and some people just don't want that to become the norm, right? So a lot of energy went out to telling you how stupid the Browns were for making this contract. And when you hear that as a regular person who's not a Browns fan every day, when you hear this stuff all the time, it just kind of goes, yeah, that seems right. And you don't ever really critically think about the opinion that's been kind of just shouted at you over the last 2 years since he signed that contract. But it is telling to me that so many other contracts have been signed, and yet we're still talking about Deshaun Watson's money. We're still talking about, oh, this contract was going to change everything. Nobody got the guarantees that Deshaun got after him. It didn't change anything. It's just the Browns contract that they have to deal with. And yet everybody is still so invested in fear-mongering over this contract, which tells me a lot about who really wants you to think this contract is a bad idea.
Yeah, and I don't remember the broadcast when Justin Herbert's contract got announced, and it was a round of applause in the studio saying, "Hey, don't worry, if he gets into year 4 and he sucks, they can cut him." It's like no one has that rationale, because these deals, they're still tied in for 3 years. With whoever gets signed, 3 years guaranteed, 2 years on the back, non-guaranteed. It's not the end of the world. So be it. Because if that was the case, they're still going to have a massive dead cap hit after year 3. So yeah, at the end of the day, when I think about Deshaun Watson's contract, I'm thinking about the extension that's going to come on the back of it, which is probably going to happen not next season, the season after, after his 3rd season.
No such thing as a 5-year contract.
That's where the future lies. It's not about, oh no, what's going to happen. Hey, future's bright.
And again, the Browns didn't just trade for a rookie. They traded for a former 2-time Pro Bowler who's 27 years old, who a 3-time Pro Bowler who's 27 years old, who was considered as one of the best quarterbacks the last time he played. This is not like Mike Vick coming out of jail or something like that. This is a different spot. He's basically a free agent that was a top tier quarterback that was that got top level money in a situation where nobody else has ever really been in. Like Lamar Jackson still kind of had to work under the structures of the team because he could at the end of the day get franchise tagged. They had mechanisms to use against him, right? Every other quarterback that signed a contract had those mechanisms against him. You look at Kirk Cousins, when he broke out into the free market and signed with the Minnesota Vikings, he signed another deal that was groundbreaking like that. This is what happens when young-ish quarterbacks who are like, and Kirk Cousins wasn't as good as DESHAUN, right, in Washington. Just if you're a young quarterback who gets into the free market that is legitimately good, you're gonna get a crazy deal because the price is high for the most important position in the game, especially for a young guy who can be your quarterback for like the next 7-8 years.
And it's a pretty irrelevant throwaway. Oh yeah, we'll make it guaranteed. So what? It's effectively that mentality of like, yeah, of course we'll guarantee it. Is that it? Is that all we need to do in negotiation? You don't want more money. You don't want that. You just want the money we're definitely going to give you. You want us to promise we're definitely going to give it to you. Okay.
It's not a deal breaker big enough to not, if you have a chance of getting somebody of that caliber at that age, to not go for it, right? It is the main point I think we're trying to make here is we yell over this guarantee, but at the end of the day, I don't think anybody within the front office or even like within other front offices, like, you don't even hear other GMs complain about it. You hear owners complain about it. And some owners are as clueless about the salary cap as the people in the video, right? Like, so it's really just those people are upset, but the front office people are like, yeah, what do you mean? Like, if you got to get Deshaun Watson, you got to get him. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you got to do what you got to do. And if that's all he's asking for, sure, right? Like,
over the cap. Yeah, that one's over the cap. I'm sorry, no, the one I was on Spot Track. Spot Track and over the cap are the two ones that you do. Yeah, I mean, Stern, like, legitimately,
I'm a Spot Track guy.
If you look right now, so
they're at negative 85 million in cap space for 2024.
Dude, legit. Like, so this goes right negative 56 right here, and because they also have Amari Cooper, Deshaun Watson is right there, and it's not going to get too much better. Like Watson, if he is bad, if he's just bad or very mediocre, it is going to handcuff them so badly into making moves and be competitive. So yeah, maybe they get Dorian Thompson-Robinson, but and he turns out to be above average. Right?
Hey Jack, if Pat Mahomes stinks all of a sudden, is that a great contract for the Chiefs?
Yeah, it's going to ruin the Chiefs franchise. You don't need anything to understand that if your QB sucks, it hurts.
Mm-hmm. And that's like, they're making this point of like, hey, if he stinks, then it's not going to work out. And it's like, well, obviously, if that happens, any contract is not going to be good, right? If you just signed Joe Burrow to a new deal and he stinks after that new deal, you're not going to love that new deal that you just signed. So like, I think what the word I'm looking for is like this kind of a fallacy that he's arguing on of, well, what if he's bad? What if this happens? What if this goes wrong? Of course, if things go wrong, it's not going to be great. But you're not trading for him because you think things are going to go wrong or that there's a high chance that things go wrong.
Yeah, and if it is that he's a disaster and we roll with DTR, then we go from spending 50 million a year more than the league average to we are spending the league average and plus this $46 million contract. So what? That would effectively be my view. It's like we're suddenly average, so hey, we're spending more than the Bengals. Still, it's not like it's suddenly we go from we're outspending the league to we are the poorest team in the league with the same budget as like the Bears for the last 3 years. People are worrying about stuff that it's just feet up. I'm chilling. I'm loving life. I'm just happy that when Paul DeBodesta joined the Browns, I became a Browns fan. If he had joined the Bengals, I'd have been bloody depressed. Covering the cap for the Bengals must be it must grind on you daily.
Yeah, and it's like they're basically saying like, hey man, if you buy a house and it burns down the next day, that's gonna be pretty bad, right? It's gonna stink. You're gonna be screwed, right? Yeah, of course. No stuff. You know what I mean? But that's not a valid argument, right? Like you can't make that argument. You can argue what are the chances that he returns to good, and you have to make the point that like it's probably it's more reasonable than not to assume that Deshaun Watson probably looks like Deshaun Watson again, right? Because he's 27 and like he still athletically looks like Deshaun Watson. Like it doesn't seem like there's been a decline there. But yeah, that's just a fallacy that they're arguing on to begin with.
Right? Or even when he turns out to be good. That's
the
all.
49ers. Hey, they invested their 3 first-round picks. It didn't work out, and they've got Brock Purdy. No one is saying burn the franchise down. They're still competing. They will have a good season, and that's
even if it
fine.
Even if it doesn't work out, there's still a chance that stuff can work out. Like, you know, it's never this destroying franchise thing that people want to make it out to be. And honestly, there's worse ways to miss than swinging on a quarterback that you think can be in the league.
That's all well and
the
good.
Eagles.
They are still
Perfect example. They paid Carson Wentz. They thought he was the guy. He didn't work out to be the guy. But what happened? Smart front office went mid-round pick. Let's get another quarterback in. Cheap rookie deal. Give ourselves some insurance. And I actually said at the time when the DTR pick was made, it's like, this could be their Hurts. Lots of people didn't like it at the time. Why are they spending this pick on a QB? They could spend it on someone else. If everything went wrong and Howie Roseman had no Jalen Hurts and they were having to keep rolling Carson Wentz out or sign some God knows what, that's your job for getting really warm. Whereas if Deshaun Watson doesn't work out and say the second half of next season, they go, look, we're giving up on this. We'll roll with DTR, and DTR lights it up, and you're in the playoffs. No one's going to be sat there going, "Oh, woe is me." You're in the playoffs. Doesn't matter. You've just got to keep trucking forward. And there is a lot of fear mongering, and it's for people that, even if they do cover the salary cap, the Browns are operating in a different way, and people just need to accept that. We are not the Bengals, thank God, in terms of salary cap. I'd love to have their QB, love to have their couple of wide receivers. They have some good parts, don't get me wrong, but they are not in the same financial ballpark.
Yep. This is owner situation, really.
Ton that is going to hurt that team for the next few years, minimum. And Nick Chubb not getting younger. That defense, Myles Garrett, not getting any younger. They put everything on Deshaun Watson being great.
You know, they make a point against. He makes a point against himself. Yeah, Nick Chubb not getting any younger. Myles Garrett not getting any younger. Denzel Ward not getting any younger. So of course you put all your eggs in on trying to get a quarterback right now. It makes sense. It makes sense. What were they supposed to do? Nick Chubb and Myles Garrett not get any younger, just roll out with cheap quarterbacks. Like, I've never seen a team win a Super Bowl because they were so efficient with their money at quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, just super cheap with it at quarterback. I don't think that's usually how this works. Most of the quarterbacks that win Super Bowls are the ones you know about, and the ones you know about ain't cheap. So again, I don't get. I think the point he's trying to make is, oh, if you fail with this, those guys aren't going to get any younger. But what was the alternative? Those guys getting older and you having no chance at having decent quarterback play.
You were never getting near the top of the draft, and I think that's the worst place you can be. QB purgatory in the league. You either want to suck or you want to be really good. You can happily go through that middle of the league as long as you're ascending. But if you're descending and stagnating there, it's grim. Kirk Cousins, for me, is the beanpole of line. If you are more talented than Kirk Cousins, it's great. If you're less talented than Kirk Cousins, it's not good enough. And so Kirk, for me, is like he is the bellwether. Kirk Cousins is like, it could come together, and I see Kirk Cousins having a playoff run potential. But if you get any worse than Kirk Cousins, it's not going to be.
It becomes harder and harder, right? It's the thing that happened with the Titans. I don't know how much worse Ryan Tannehill's gotten since 2019, but I do know it's gotten so much harder just to get to the AFC Championship game with Ryan Tannehill as your quarterback since 2019, right? Because before then, you're talking about maybe beating Derek Carr in the first round, right? Getting to the second round, maybe a team has a quarterback, and then you get to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now we're talking about you might play Herbert in the first round. You might play Trevor Lawrence in the first round. You might play a very talented and still decently quarterback team like the Dolphins, right, in the first round. And then the second round, you're getting Mahomes, you're getting Buffalo, you're getting Cincinnati, right? Like that's one of those three teams. And then whoever you don't play of one of those three teams, you're probably getting in the conference championship game. You can't just get by if you don't have a quarterback who can fight in the same weight class as those guys. And that's where the AFC is. That's where you see a lot of teams going. And it's no mistake, as all of those young guys got here, all of the old guys who were available all of a sudden made their way here because other AFC teams know we got to find a way to compete, right? If you're the Jets, you can't just sit idly by while everybody else is building and hope that, what's the young guy that got over there from BYU? Zach Wilson like figures it out. No, you got to go get Aaron Rodgers right now. Because if you don't have anybody who can compete, you're not going to make it, right? The days of being able to Daniel Jones your way to the second round in the AFC, that's just not happening anymore, at least for the near future. And that's why Denver goes out and trades for Russ, right? That's why the Browns go out and trade for Deshaun Watson. It's not rocket science, it's pretty basic math to tell you how we got here, why teams are doing it, and why this is probably a better option than anything else that anybody suggests. And again, if you didn't want the Browns to spend the money on Deshaun Watson, tell me what you felt like the alternative was, because none of the draft picks that the Browns gave up in the last 2 years were going to get you a franchise quarterback. Yeah, like maybe you think Kenny Pickett is that, but like unless that, like what the Browns picked this year wasn't netting anybody one of the top quarterbacks coming out, you weren't getting Anthony Richardson or anybody who went before him with that pick. You weren't getting Bryce or CJ. You're not going to get Caleb Williams. You're not going to stink that bad with Myles Garrett and Nick Chubb on a roster. So again, what was the alternative for the Cleveland Browns? Because we're either talking about a team that has a quarterback or that doesn't and has to trade these guys for more draft picks to try to get a quarterback, right, eventually.
But there is so much talent in the AFC, as you just listed, that you could easily get to the Super Bowl and you've played Mahomes, Burrow, Josh Allen, Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. You've played all these guys and then suddenly you end up against Brock Purdy. That's madness.
Is there anything else about the contract, if you've heard a lot, that you would like to, say your piece on what you feel like is misinformation about it?
Yeah, so I'd just say, in terms of like how the Browns deal with it moving forward, I wrote an article on what they're going to do like the day the contract came out. And I said, this is what's going to happen here and here and here. And then I've just released a updated version of that earlier in the off season. But they've restructured the second year. It's always going to happen. The third year, so next season, based on how he's playing, as long as he's playing well, they will restructure that one again, which will give you a massive cap hit in year 4 and 5 of the deal. They're not too concerned about that. But then what they will do at the end of year 3 is they will then get round the table. He's got 2 years left on his contract, which tends to be the time major players where they'll do a deal, come to an extension, and then they'll put another potentially 5-year fully guaranteed deal on the table, or it might be one that is rolling guarantees where every year, 2 years into the future, that year becomes guaranteed, similar to Patrick Mahomes, because Patrick Mahomes' deal is effectively fully guaranteed, but it guarantees 2 years into the future rather than all 5 years of it is done. So it might be something nearer that, but they're going to do it, and that would be the timeline for it. So likely plays well, restructure next year, and then before the 2024 season, they then after the 2024 season, they do the deal and keep him around. And I think he'll retire a Cleveland Brown. So exciting times ahead. If you're ever wondering what's going on with the salary cap stuff, my pinned tweet on Twitter, I always leave that as sort of a one for people to jump in. They can see what the number is. People get too caught up in what the salary cap space is, what a salary cap number is, dead cap. The key things is guarantees in non-QB deals, and then how much cash people are getting. The Browns are in a really nice spot, provided 2 things don't happen. If Jimmy gets bored and stops pumping in money, we're screwed. And as well, if there's another pandemic and the salary cap collapses, it will be brutal for the Browns as they gut the roster, and there's no real clean way of getting out of that. So as long as it keeps going up, as you would expect it, and Jimmy's happy and keeps pumping money in, it's party time.
Yeah, the basic thinking with a lot of salary cap management now is the line's going to go up, right? So we kick this down the road. Eventually, it's not going to be that big of a. Pittsburgh did this with Big Ben, right, until the end of his career, and then like everybody was freaking out about what the hit's going to be or this, and they figured out a way to make it like what I think it ended at $36 million over those 2 years, and it's not that big of a deal. Like it ended up not being that big of a deal for them. But you know,
the retiring player signs like a 1-day deal, and so they flip the contract into the next year and split it over 2 years. So it's what happened with Brady, it happened with Big Ben, it happened with Drew Brees, and that's effectively what they'll do. The 2 years after Deshaun Watson retires will be a weird sort of transition as they work out what they're going to do, and that's perfectly fine. If he wins 1 or 2 Super Bowls, no one's going to care that there's a 1-2 years where you have to go to a cheap QB and you figure it out. We'll still be drunk from the Super Bowl party.
Hey, look, yeah, I'm pretty sure Tampa Bay's not really freaking out that much that they got to play Baker Mayfield right now. But Jack, thank you for coming on. I appreciate your insight, man. Make sure you find Jack at OBR, right? You're still at OBR. He does a lot of great stuff on the cap there. Make sure you check out his Twitter. He's a great follow. You get all the Browns make a move, and then like 20 minutes later, Jack's out here with a breakdown of what that actually means. So that's always a great follow. So make sure you check him out there. But everybody else, y'all have a great day. Have an even better night.